July 1099. Jerusalem is burning. Frankish knights surge through the streets shouting, "God wills it," as the city falls. They call themselves pilgrims, but look at them, armed to the teeth. Swords, bows, and a new idea. Holy war in the Holy Land under the sign of the cross. They believe God is waiting beyond those walls. Yet their leaders are driven by something else entirely: land and power. So, what promises and ambitions turned a pilgrimage into the First Crusade? Long before the siege of Jerusalem, the road began in the cold air of Clermont, France on November 27th, 1095. Pope Urban II stood before nobles and townsfolk and promised remission of sins to those who took the cross and recaptured Jerusalem in the name of God. Recapture from whom? Well, since the 7th century, Muslim expansion swept across the Levant and North Africa and into most of Iberia, territories that had previously been under Christian rule. By the 11th century, Iberian Christians advanced again and recovered some territory, while links to the Holy Land had weakened. Pilgrims reported harassment, and about 2/3 of formerly Christian lands now stood under two factions of Muslim rulers: Seljuks and Fatimids. Behind Pope Urban's call to take back Jerusalem was a plea from Constantinople. Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos had watched the Seljuk Turks advance into much of Anatolia, taking Christian lands under Muslim rule. Alexios asked for veteran soldiers, and Urban answered with an army of penitents. The Pope's plan to tie Eastern security to Western salvation looked workable on day one and complicated by day two. You see, growing differences between East and West culminated back in 1054 when Rome's emissaries and the Patriarch of Constantinople excommunicated each other. Now Urban sought to assert leadership over all Christendom again. A massive, unified expedition under papal banners promised relief for Byzantium and prestige for Rome. Luckily for Urban, 11th century Europe was primed for violence. There were plenty of trained knights around and not enough peaceful hobbies to keep them busy, so they kept fighting each other. Growing population meant younger sons saw little land ownership, which made them ideal candidates for conquests in the east. The crusade offered them purpose, salvation, land, loot, and a path upward. Urban was giving them a licensed battlefield far away from home. By early 1096, the idea became motion and the crowds moved first. This initial group, driven by religious fervour, organised what is called the People's Crusade. Well, organised is an overstatement. Preachers like Peter the Hermit and minor lords like Walter Sans Avoir gathered thousands of people in spring 1096, mixing townsfolk, minor knights and their families. Estimates vary between 30 and 100,000 participants. Leaders promised God would provide and failed to arrange grain contracts or river transport. The march began with devotion and soon ran on improvisation. As scattered groups passed along the Rhine, some pilgrims attacked Jewish communities. The violence darkened the movement's start and drained order while they still had half a continent to cross. On the roads through Bavaria and into Hungary, discipline wavered again. Hungarian King Clermont was forced to intervene militarily against some of these pillaging pilgrims. Shattered by Clermont's armies, many gave up on the adventure and went back home. Finally, some of them reached Byzantine lands. Emperor Alexios wanted the crowds moved quickly past his capital and into Asia. No doubt he heard about the havoc they caused along the way. Alexios ferried them over the Bosporus in batches just to keep order, but they eventually started pillaging the countryside on the Asian side. At this point, Peter the Hermit had completely lost control over them and returned to Constantinople to seek guidance. To make things worse, the pilgrims started arguing with each other and formed separate bands largely based on ethnicity. Detachments began probing further inland and wandered into Seljuk territory. A German group started raiding minor fortifications and even captured a small fortress. This prompted an answer from the Seljuks, who took it back. Then they sent spies into the main pilgrim camp, spreading the rumour that Nicaea, the main Seljuk stronghold in the region, fell into German hands. Overtaken with excitement, the main group hurried to Nicaea and fell straight into the trap set by Kilij Arslan, the Seljuk Sultan of Rum. On October 21st, 1096, as pilgrims moved through a wooded valley near Siveto, horse archers poured arrows into their flanks and rear. The column bent, then broke. The fight became a rout. Some groups reached a small walled enclosure by the shore and held ground until Byzantine ships hauled survivors aboard under fire. Only a fraction made it back to Constantinople. Walter Sans-Avoir was not among them. He was struck down by arrows. After this complete fiasco, Peter the Hermit and a couple thousand survivors waited for the main Crusader force in Constantinople. But the People's Crusade had an unexpected outcome on the Seljuk side. Kilij Arslan judged that if this had been the Western threat, he could afford to ride east against rivals and leave Nicaea with a modest garrison. Months later, that assumption would cost him when a different kind of army, the Prince's Crusade, arrived with heavy weapons and discipline. Well, sort of. Back in the West, news of the People's Crusade fiasco sobered the mustering nobles. Godfrey of Bouillon sold lands to fund his march, gathered men from Lorraine and moved by the Danube in late 1096 with his brother Baldwin. Raymond of Toulouse raised a large provincial host with papal legate Adhemar of Le Puy at his side. Bohemond of Taranto, seasoned from wars in the Balkans, rallied Normans from southern Italy with his nephew Tancred. Across the Channel and the Seine, Robert of Normandy and Stephen Henry of Blois pledged to go. Robert of Flanders readied a compact, disciplined force. Their routes converged on Constantinople by winter 1096 to spring 1097. All in all, somewhere between 40 and 60,000 people joined the Prince's Crusade. Emperor Alexios I had prepared for their arrival. He wanted every leader to swear an oath to return former imperial lands and to hold new conquests as Byzantine fiefs. Among the princes, Raymond hesitated longest. He framed his oath to protect the emperor's person and rights without naming every future prize. In exchange, the emperor offered ferries across the Bosporus, guides and veteran officers who were very familiar with Seljuk tactics. When their banners rose on the far bank in spring 1097, they looked like an army, not a crowd. Their first shared target stood close, Nicaea, the Seljuk capital in northwestern Anatolia. Taking it would secure the route inland and prove the alliance with Byzantium could work under pressure. Godfrey, Raymond, Bohemond and Robert of Flanders drew a ring of camps outside the city and started building siege engines. Alexios turned the lake into leverage. Byzantine boats hauled overland and launched onto the water behind the city, cut Nicaea's resupply. Mid-June brought a hard test. Kilij Arslan gathered his horsemen for a relief strike, hoping to break a segment of the ring and pull the Crusaders into open ground. The Crusader vanguard took the shock. After hours of arrows and charges, Western infantry held firm behind shields while heavy cavalry countered. Under pressure, the Seljuk attack faded back into the hills, leaving the city to its dwindling stores. By late June, cracks showed in walls and wills alike. Negotiations ran through Byzantine envoys who promised fair treatment and imperial protection if the city yielded to Alexios. On June 19, 1097, the garrison accepted those terms. Alexios took the city under Byzantine control and prevented the Crusaders from plundering it. He gifted them generously as compensation. The emperor's policy kept the city intact, upheld oaths and kept order, while planting a memory that some Western leaders would not forget. Nicaea's fall secured the Bosporus bridgehead, gave Byzantium restored influence in the region, and set a reliable supply base behind the armies. The Crusade had scored a disciplined win. By July 1097, the army moved in two columns. Bohemond and Robert of Normandy led the vanguard with Tancred. Godfrey, Raymond, Adhemar and Robert of Flanders followed with the main body. On July 1st near Dorylaeum, Kilij Arslan and his horse archers had found the forward camp at dawn and struck. Bohemond ordered a tight defence. Tancred and the Normans held the corners where the circling volleys bit hardest. When news reached the main Crusader army, they marched as fast as they could. The main body extended the line and opened lanes for a countercharge. When Seljuk riders switched to close passes, the Crusader heavy cavalry launched in short bursts, smashing isolated knots and falling back before arrows chewed their horses. By afternoon, the pressure shifted. The field now held two joined camps with room to breathe between them, and reinforcements kept arriving. Under mounting pressure, the Seljuk riders retreated. The Battle of Dorylaeum taught Crusaders to keep columns within trumpet range, to guard baggage with infantry, and let cavalry strike in timed pulses rather than in one proud rush. It also cleared the road into the deep interior, but Kilij Arslan answered with scorched earth and poisoned wells. The Crusaders' next enemy would be the land. Now losses came without battles. Pack animals dropped first, then men who had drunk brackish water too quickly. The army learned to march by schedule: early start, midday halt, evening move to a water point if scouts found one. By late 1097, the worst of the crossing lay behind them. Ahead waited the test of longer sieges and the reward of richer cities. Baldwin and Tancred broke away from the main army and probed the lands for fortifications, proving side quests existed long before anyone named them. Baldwin was ambitious and sought to create a fiefdom under his personal rule in this region where many Armenian Christians lived. But Tancred arrived ahead of him at Tarsus and occupied the city. Then the superior forces of Baldwin arrived, forcing Tancred to surrender it. This created lasting friction between the two leaders over territorial control in the region. The conflict continued to the nearby city of Mamistra, where fighting broke out between their forces. This rivalry caused the first major split in the Crusader princes' ranks. Then Baldwin received envoys from the major city of Edessa, ruled by Thoros, a veteran with lingering ties to Byzantium. He asked for help against the Seljuks, and in a surprising move, he even adopted Baldwin as his son to cement the alliance. Baldwin discovered adoption could be a surprisingly effective career move. His adoptive father's enemies supported a riot in March, and Thoros was killed. We don't know if Baldwin arranged the fall or simply failed to stop it. Either way, he pushed himself into power and took the title Count of Edessa. He then married into local nobility to cement alliances and solidify his power. Now the city's treasury and granaries began to feed his plans. Baldwin's county anchored the Crusades' far left, screened the Euphrates flank, and drew Turkish attention away from Antioch, the most important city on the way to Jerusalem. The new count also widened the political gap with Byzantium. Edessa had not belonged to the empire in the recent past, and Alexios had not guided this takeover. Meanwhile, the other princes reached Antioch in October 1097 and saw its walls climb the steep, craggy slopes of Mount Silpius. Taking it by storm looked costly, starving it looked slow but achievable. They settled in, cut roads as best they could, knowing relief armies would come. As the months passed, both sides became miserable. The defenders in Antioch scraped for resources as few convoys made it through, while the starving Crusaders rejoiced when a Genoese fleet landed with supplies. By spring 1098, Bohemond hunted for an answer inside Antioch's walls. Through intermediaries, he courted a tower guard who hated the current lord more than he feared betrayal. On June 2nd at night, this tower guard let a small force in and gates were opened. Some Greek and Armenian Christians wanted to welcome the Crusaders in, but many perished in the chaos and confusion that followed. Most of the city fell on June 3rd. They had it under control for about 5 seconds when Kerboga, the Muslim governor of Mosul, arrived with an army and trapped them inside Antioch. Just like that, the besiegers became the besieged, and their fate looked dire. A very good moment for some of them to give up. By the way, since you made it this far, consider subscribing to help us grow. Now, back to the siege. Stephen of Blois and his men abandoned the fight. On his way back, he met Emperor Alexios, who was gathering a relief army, and convinced him that the crusade was a lost cause. This meant Alexios now failed to bring reinforcements to the princes who didn't give up just yet. It felt like betrayal, and some considered their oaths to the emperor voided. Then, in mid-June, a Provençal visionary, Peter Bartholomew, claimed he had found the Holy Lance under the floor of a church in Antioch. This was supposedly the lance that pierced the side of Jesus during the crucifixion. Rallied by the finding, the Crusaders organised and pushed back. On June 28th, they marched out in divisions, banners spaced to look larger than their numbers. Crusader heavy charges rolled the enemy line. Kerboga's allies wavered under the unexpected aggression, and the Seljuk camp cracked into withdrawals. By day's end, the Muslim coalition broke, the siege lifted, and the citadel soon yielded. Arguments about who should own Antioch started right on schedule. Bohemond pointed to his negotiation of the night entry and claimed the city as his by right. Raymond of Toulouse argued the oaths at Constantinople bound them to return great cities to Alexios. His insistence was partly to prevent his rival from gaining too much power. And so the Crusaders had won a fortress and inherited a quarrel. Plus, their attitude towards Byzantium was changing for the worse. To top it all off, disease also cut through their ranks. In August, Adhemar of Le Puy, the papal legate who had kept relative unity since Clermont, died, and with him went a voice both sides trusted. Starvation followed when Muslim subjects in the area refused to provide Antioch with food, while tension mounted between Bohemond and Raymond. Early in 1099, reality settled the debate. Antioch could not feed everyone, so they had to keep moving. Then, news from the south arrived. The Fatimid Muslims had retaken Jerusalem from the Seljuks the year before, changing the enemy they would face at the end of the road. At this point, the majority of the Crusader leadership supported Bohemond's claim on the city, and Raymond was forced to eventually abandon his push for its return. By early spring, they moved south in thin lines, hugging the Levantine coast. They stalled for weeks at Arca without capturing it. In April, one of the clerical factions accused Peter Bartholomew of false claims regarding the Holy Lance he found. To prove its authenticity, he was challenged to trial by ordeal. This meant walking through fire while holding the Holy Lance to prove his divine visions were true. Basically, the medieval version of Pix, or it didn't happen. Except the Pix were flames. Peter died a few days later in agony from the burns he suffered. This had a demoralizing effect and undermined Raymond's reputation, as he had risked his influence on the legitimacy of Peter's claims. On June 7th, 3 years after setting out from Western Europe, the Crusaders finally reached their destination, Jerusalem. Somewhere between 12 and 15,000 of them made it to this point, less than a quarter of the number that started the journey. Upon sighting the city, many Crusaders wept, knelt, and prayed. They shouted, "Deus lo volt! God wills it!" the famous war cry from Clermont. Jerusalem's Fatimid garrison was led by Iftikhar ad-Dawla, who anticipated the attack by poisoning wells, cutting down surrounding trees and expelling Christians. The Crusaders realized a long siege was hopeless given their small numbers, so they decided to skip the tutorial and start a direct assault. An initial attack on June 13th failed due to a lack of siege equipment, particularly lumber, and severe shortages of water and food. Then a Genoese fleet arrived at Jaffa in mid-June. It brought carpenters and tools. When engineers called for timber, someone pointed helpfully at the ships themselves. They were dismantled, and the crews used the resulting timber to build 2 large siege towers, Godfrey's in the north, Raymond's in the south. On July 8th, priests led a barefoot procession around the walls, chanting and lifting relics as the army circled under hostile eyes. The final push started on July 14th, and 1 day later, Godfrey's tower reached the northern wall, allowing Crusaders to breach the defences. Godfrey's assault party crossed the bridge, gained the rampart, and widened the gap under a storm of arrows. Then the Fatimid resistance collapsed in the south as well, and the city gates were opened. Upon entering the city, the Crusaders carried out a large-scale massacre. The Eastern Christian population likely would have suffered the same fate if they hadn't been expelled from the city before the siege. Iftikhar withdrew to the citadel and ultimately negotiated safe passage with Raymond in exchange for surrender. 1 week after the city fell, leaders organized a council to decide who would rule Jerusalem. Raymond graciously refused, declaring he would not wear a crown of gold in the city where Christ wore a crown of thorns. Instead, on July 22nd, 1099, the council appointed Godfrey to rule the Kingdom of Jerusalem, taking the title Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. Muslim forces would put that title to the test on August 12th when the Crusaders defeated a relieving Fatimid army at the Battle of Ascalon, securing their hold on the city. Godfrey then started consolidating his kingdom, but he fell ill and died barely a year in power. His supporters called on his brother, Baldwin, Count of Edessa, to rush in and take the throne before other claimants could react. Baldwin was crowned King of Jerusalem and consolidated his power in the following years by capturing the cities of Acre and Sidon. Jerusalem became the most powerful of the Crusader kingdoms. Northward, Raymond founded the county of Tripoli in 1102. Further north, beyond Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, ruled by Bohemond, guarded the Anatolian border from Seljuk attacks. To the northeast, the county of Edessa under Baldwin II screened the Euphrates crossings. These 4 Crusader states now dominated the Levantine coast, yet they were outnumbered, surrounded, and constantly short on money and manpower. Relations with Byzantium were strained, and they had to rely on constant reinforcements from Europe. The Muslim response was hesitant at first due to the Sunni versus Shia divide. Truth be told, they didn't take the Crusaders seriously until the princes settled in. Over time, the Muslim factions steadily closed in, tightening the noose around the Crusader states. The First Crusade achieved its objective, and the Latin Knights established themselves in the region. But how long could they hold on before the tide turned? You see, capturing Jerusalem is not the end of this story, it's just the beginning of a cycle. The moment these states were created, they also created the reason for further crusades to happen. If you want the story of what came after, the struggle of the kings who gambled on the next crusade, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. The reel of time never stops.